Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Readings in Isolation. My name is Saman Giraud and I'm your host tonight. I must tell you, I had a lovely surprise. Joanna came to visit me today and brought me two super fancy masks because I've been running around with those supermarket masks, and they are lovely, and I was so happy to see her. So be kind to your friends. It takes a big person and a heart filled with love to share your appreciation for others. I'm going to start reading for you the 31st night, and I hope you're all comfortable. I'm going to get comfortable too, as usual. Enjoy the reading. Now when it was the 31st night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the Qazi said to the servants, 'What hath your master done to me that I should kill him? This is my house, and it is open to you all.' Then quoth the barber, 'Thou didst beat him, and I heard him cry out.' And quoth the Qazi, 'But what was he doing that I should beat him? And what brought him into my house? And whence came he, and whither went he?' 'Be not a wicked, perverse old man,' cried the barber, 'for I know the whole story, and the long and short of it is that thy daughter is in love with him, and he loves her. And when thou knewest that he had entered the house, thou badest thy servants beat him, and they did so. By Allah, none shall judge between us and thee, but the Caliph, or else do thou bring out our master, that his folk may take him, before they go in and save him perforce from thy house, and thou be put to shame.' Then said the Qazi, and his tongue was bridled, and his mouth was stopped by confusion before the people, 'And thou say sooth, do thou come in and fetch him out?' Whereupon the barber pushed forward and entered the house. When I saw this, I looked about for a means of escape and flight, but saw no hiding place except a great chest in the upper chamber where I was. So I got into it and pulled the lid down upon myself and held my breath. The barber was hardly in the room before he began to look about for me, then turned him right and left and came straight to the place where I was, and stepped up to the chest, and lifting it on his head, made off as fast as he could. At this, my reason forsook me, for I knew that he would not let me be. So I took courage, and opening the chest, threw myself to the ground. My leg was broken in the fall, and the door being open, I saw a great concourse of people looking in. Now I carried in my sleeve much gold and some silver, which I had provided for an ill day like this and the like of such occasion. So I kept scattering it amongst the folk to divert their attention from me. And whilst they were busy scrambling for it, I set off, hopping as fast as I could through the by-streets of Baghdad, shifting and turning right and left. But whithersoever I went, this damned barber would go in after me, crying aloud. They would have bereft me of my master. They would have slain him who was a benefactor to me and my family and my friends. Praised be Allah, who made me prevail against them and delivered my Lord from their hands. Then to me, 'Where wilt thou go now? Thou wouldst persist in following thine own evil devices till thou broughtest thyself to this ill pass. And had not Allah vouchsafed me to thee, never hadst thou escaped this strait into which thou hast fallen. For they would have cast thee into a calamity whence thou never couldst have won free. But I will not call thee to account for thine ignorance, as thou art so little of wit, and inconsequential, and addicted to hastiness.' Said I to him, Doth not what thou hast brought upon me suffice thee? But thou must run after me and talk me such talk in the bazaar streets? And I well nigh gave up the ghost for excess of rage against him. Then I took refuge in the shop of a weaver, amiddlemost of the market, and sought protection of the owner who drove the barber away. And, sitting in the back room, I said to myself, if I return home, I shall never be able to get rid of this curse of a barber who will be with me night and day, and I cannot endure the sight of him even for a breathing space. So I sent out at once for witnesses and made a will, dividing the greater part of my property among my people, and appointed a guardian over them, to whom I committed the charge of great and small, directing him to sell my houses and domains. Then I set out on my travels, that I might be free of this pimp, and I came to settle in your town, where I have lived some time. When you invited me and I came hither, the first thing I saw was this accursed pander seated in the place of honour. How then can my heart be glad and my stay be pleasant in company with this fellow who brought all this upon me, and who was the cause of the breaking of my leg and of my exile from home and native land? And the youth refused to sit down and went away. When we heard this story, continued the tailor, we were amazed beyond measure, and amused, and said to the barber, by Allah, is it true what this young man saith of thee? By Allah, replied he, I dealt thus by him of my courtesy and sound sense and generosity. Had it not been for me, he had perished, and none but I was the cause of his escape. Well, it was for him that he suffered in his leg, and not in his life. Had I been a man of many words, a meddler, a busybody, I had not acted thus kindly by him. But now I will tell you a tale which befell me, that you may be well assured I am a man sparing of speech, in whom is no forwardness, and a very different person from those 6 brothers of mine. And this it is: the barber's tale of himself. I was living in Baghdad during the times of Al-Mustansir Billah, son of Al-Mustazi Billah, the then Caliph, a prince who loved the poor and needy, and companied with the learned and pious. One day it happened to him that he was wroth with 10 persons, highwaymen who robbed on the Caliph's highway, and he ordered the prefect of Baghdad to bring them into the presence on the anniversary of the great festival. So the prefect sallied out, and making them his prisoners, embarked with them in a boat. I caught sight of them as they were embarking, and said to myself, these are surely assembled for a marriage feast. Methinks they are spending the day in that boat, eating and drinking, and none shall be companion of their cups but I myself. So I rose, O fair assembly, and of the excess of my courtesy and the gravity of my understanding, I embarked with them, and entered into conversation with them. They rowed across to the opposite bank, where they landed, and there came up the watch and guardians of the peace, with chains which they put round the robbers' necks. They chained me among the rest of them. And, O people, is it not a proof of my courtesy and spareness of speech that I held my peace and did not please to speak? Then they took us away in bilboes, and next morning carried us all before Al-Mustansir Billah, commander of the faithful, who bade smite the necks of the 10 robbers. So the sworder came forward, after they were seated on the leather of blood. Then, drawing his blade, struck off one head after another, until he had smitten the neck of the 10th, and I alone remained. The Caliph looked at me and asked the headsman, saying, "What ails thee, that thou hast struck off only 9 heads?" And he answered, "Allah forbid that I should behead only 9 when thou biddest me behead 10. Quoth the Caliph, "Meseems thou hast smitten the necks of only 9, and this man before thee is the 10th. "By thy beneficence," replied the headsman, "I have beheaded 10. "Count them," cried the Caliph. And when they counted heads, lo, there were 10. The Caliph looked at me and said, "What made thee keep silent at a time like this, and how camest thou to company with these men of blood? Tell me the cause of all this, for albeit thou art a very old man, assuredly thy wits are weak." Now when I heard these words from the Caliph, I sprang to my feet and replied, "Know, O Prince of the Faithful, that I am the silent sheikh, and am thus called to distinguish myself from my 6 brothers. I am a man of immense learning, whilst as for the gravity of my understanding, the wiliness of my wits, and the spareness of my speech, there is no end to them. And my calling is that of a barber. I went out early on yesterday morning and saw these men making for a skiff, and fancying they were bound for a marriage feast, I joined them and mixed with them. After a while up came the watch and guardians of the peace, who put chains round their necks and round mine with the rest. But in the excess of my courtesy I held my peace, and spake not a word, nor was this other but generosity on my part. They brought us into thy presence, and thou gavest an order to smite the necks of the 10. Yet did I not make myself known to thee, and remain silent before this order, purely of my great generosity and courtesy, which led me to share with them in their death. But all my life long have I dealt thus nobly with mankind, and they requited me the foulest and evilest requital. When the Caliph heard my words, and knew that I was a man of exceeding generosity and of very few words, one in whom is no forwardness, as this youth would have it, whom I rescued from mortal risk, and who hath so scurvily repaid me, he laughed with excessive laughter till he fell upon his back. Then said he to me, "O silent man, do thy 6 brothers favour thee in wisdom and knowledge and spareness of speech?" I replied, "Never were they like me. Thou puttest reproach upon me, O Commander of the Faithful, and it becomes thee not to even my brothers with me, for of the abundance of their speech and the deficiency of courtesy and gravity, each one of them hath gotten some maim or other. One is a monocular, another palsied, a third stone blind, a fourth cropped of ears and nose, and a fifth shorn of both lips, while the 6th is a hunchback and a cripple. And conceive not, O Commander of the Faithful, that I am prodigal of speech, but I must perforce explain to thee that I am a man of greater worth and fewer words than any of them. From each one of my brothers hangs a tale of how he came by his bodily defect, and these I will relate to thee." So the Caliph gave ear to the barber's tale of his first brother. "Know then, O Commander of the Faithful, that my first brother, Al-Bakbuk, the prattler, is a hunchback who took to tailoring in Baghdad, and he used to sew in a shop hired from a man of much wealth, who dwelt over the shop, and there was also a flour mill in the basement. One day, as my brother, the hunchback, was sitting in his shop a-tailoring, he chanced to raise his head and saw a lady like the rising full moon at a balconied window of his landlord's house, engaged in looking out at the passers-by. When my brother beheld her, his heart was taken with love of her, and he passed his whole day gazing at her, and neglected his tailoring till eventide. Next morning he opened his shop and sat him down to sew, but as often as he stitched a stitch, he looked to the window and saw her as before, and his passion and infatuation for her increased. On the third day, as he was sitting in his usual place, gazing on her, she caught sight of him, and perceiving that he had been captivated with love of her, laughed in his face, and he smiled back at her. Then she disappeared, and presently sent her slave girl to him with a bundle containing a piece of red flowered silk. The handmaid accosted him and said, "My lady salameth to thee, and desireth thee of thy skill and goodwill to fashion for her a shift of this piece, and to sew it handsomely with thy best sewing." He replied, hearkening and obedience, and shaped for her a chemise, and finished sewing it the same day. When the morning morrowed, the girl came back and said to him, "My lady salameth to thee, and asks how thou hast passed yesternight, for she hath not tasted sleep by reason of her heart being taken up with thee." Then she laid before him a piece of yellow satin and said, "My lady biddeth thee cut her 2 pairs of petticoat trousers out of this piece, and sew them this very day." "Hearkening and obedience," replied he. "Greet her for me with many greetings, and say to her, thy slave is obedient to thine order, so command him as thou wilt." Then he applied himself to cutting out, and worked hard at sewing the trousers, and after an hour the lady appeared at the lattice, and saluted him by signs, now casting down her eyes, then smiling in his face, and he began to assure himself that he would soon make a conquest. She did not let him stir till he had finished the 2 pair of trousers, when she withdrew and sent the handmaid to whom he delivered them, and she took them and went her ways. When it was night, he threw himself on his carpet bed, and lay tossing about from side to side till morning, when he rose and sat down in his place. Presently the damsel came to him and said, "My master calleth for thee." Hearing these words, he feared with exceeding fear, but the slave girl, seeing his affright, said to him, "No evil is meant to thee, naught but good awaiteth thee. My lady would have thee make acquaintance with my lord." So my brother the tailor, rejoicing with great joy, went with her, and when he came into the presence of his landlord, the lady's husband, he kissed the ground before him, and the master of the house returned his greeting, and gave him a great piece of linen, saying, "Shape my shirts out of this stuff, and sew them well." And my brother answered, "To hear is to obey." Thereupon he fell to work at once, snipping, shaping, and sewing, till he had finished 20 shirts by supper time, without stopping to taste food. The housemaster asked him, "How much of the wage for this?" And he answered, 20 dirhams. So the gentleman cried out to the slave girl, "Bring me 20 dirhams." And my brother spake not a word, but the lady signed, "Take nothing from him." Whereupon my brother said, "By Allah, I will take naught from thy hand." And he carried off his tailor's gear and returned to his shop, although he was destitute even to a red cent. Then he applied himself to do their work, eating in his zeal and diligence but a bit of bread and drinking only a little water for 3 days. At the end of this time came the handmaid and said to him, "What hast thou done?" Quoth he, "They are finished," and carried the shirts to the lady's husband, who would have paid him his hire, but he said, "I will take nothing," for fear of her, and returning to his shop passed the night without sleep because of his hunger. Now the dame had informed her husband how the case stood, my brother knowing naught of this, and the two had agreed to make him tailor for nothing, the better to mock and laugh at him. Next morning he went to his shop, and as he sat there, the handmaid came to him and said, "Speak with my master." So he accompanied her to the husband, who said to him, "I wish thee to cut out for me 5 long-sleeved robes." So he cut them out and took the stuff and went away. Then he sewed them and carried them to the gentleman, who praised his sewing and offered him a purse of silver. He put out his hand to take it, but the lady signed to him from behind her husband not to do so, and he replied, "O my lord, there is no hurry. We have time enough for this." Then he went forth from the house, meaner and meeker than a donkey, for verily 5 things were gathered together in him, viz. Love, beggary, hunger, nakedness, and hard labour. Nevertheless, he hardened himself with the hope of gaining the lady's favours. When he had made an end of all their jobs, they played him another trick and married him to the slave girl. But on this night, when he thought to go in to her, they said to him, "Lie this night in the mill, and tomorrow all will go well." My brother concluded that there was some good cause for this, and nighted alone in the mill. Now the husband had set on the miller to make the tailor turn the mill. So when night was half spent, the man came in to him and began to say, "This bull of ours hath become useless and standeth still instead of going round. He will not turn the mill this night, and yet we have a great store of corn to be ground. However, I'll yoke him perforce and make him finish grinding it before morning, as the folk are impatient for the flour." So he filled the hoppers with grain, and going up to my brother, with a rope in his hand, tied it round his neck, and said to him, "Gee up, round with the mill. Thou, O bull, wouldst do nothing but grub and stale and dunk." Then he took a whip and laid it on the shoulders and calves of my brother, who began to howl and bellow, but none came to help him. And he was forced to grind the wheat till hard upon dawn, when the housemaster came in, and seeing my brother still tethered to the yoke, and the man flogging him, went away. At daybreak the miller returned home and left him, still yoked and half dead. And soon after in came the slave girl, who unbound him and said to him, "I and my lady are right sorry for what hath happened, and we have borne thy grief with thee." But he had no tongue wherewith to answer, from excess of beating and mill turning. Then he retired to his lodging, and behold, the clerk who had drawn up the marriage deed came to him and saluted him, saying, "Allah give thee long life. May thy spousal be blessed. This face telleth of pleasant doings and dalliance and kissing and clipping from dusk to dawn. Allah grant the liar no peace, O thou thousandfold cuckold, my brother replied. By Allah, I did nothing but turn the mill in the place of the bull all night till morning. Tell me thy tale, quoth he. And my brother recounted what had befallen him, and he said, Thy star agrees not with her star, but an thou wilt, I can alter the contract for thee. Adding, Were lest another cheat be not in store for thee. And my brother answered him, See if thou have not another contrivance. Then the clerk left him, and he sat in his shop, looking for someone to bring him a job, whereby he might earn his day's bread. Presently the handmaid came to him and said, Speak with my lady. Begone, O my good girl, replied he. There shall be no more dealings between me and thy lady. The handmaid returned to her mistress and told her what my brother had said, and presently she put her head out of the window, weeping and saying, Why, O my beloved, are there to be no more dealings twixt me and thee? But he made her no answer. Then she wept and conjured him, swearing that all which had befallen him in the mill was not sanctioned by her, and that she was innocent of the whole matter. When he looked upon her beauty and loveliness, and heard the sweetness of her speech, the sorrow which had possessed him passed from his heart. He accepted her excuse, and he rejoiced in her sight. So he saluted her and talked with her, and sat tailoring a while, after which the handmaid came to him and said, My mistress greeteth thee, and informeth thee that her husband purposeth to lie abroad this night in the house of some intimate friends of his. So when he is gone, do thou come to us and spend the night with my lady in delightsomest joyance till the morning. Now her husband had asked her, How shall we manage to turn him away from thee? And she answered, Leave me to play him another trick, and make him a laughing stock for all the town. But my brother knew naught of the malice of women. As soon as it was dusk, the slave girl came to him and carried him to the house. And when the lady saw him, she said to him, By Allah, O my lord, I have been longing exceedingly for thee. By Allah, cried he, kiss me quick before thou give me aught else. Hardly had he spoken when the lady's husband came in from the next room and seized him, saying, By Allah, I will not let thee go till I deliver thee to the chief of the town watch. My brother humbled himself to him, but he would not listen to him, and carried him before the prefect, who gave him 100 lashes with a whip, and mounting him on a camel, promenaded him round about the city, whilst the guards proclaimed aloud, This is his reward, who violated the harems of honourable man. Moreover, he fell off the camel and broke his leg, and so became lame. Then the prefect banished him from the city, and he went forth unknowing whither he should wend. But I heard of him, and fearing for him, went out after him, and brought him back secretly to the city, and restored him to health, and took him into my house, where he still liveth. The Caliph laughed at my story and said, Thou hast done well, O silent man, O spare of speech. And he bade me take a present and go away. But I said, I will accept naught of thee, except I tell thee what befell all my other brothers, and do not think me a man of many words. So the Caliph gave ear to the barber's tale of his second brother. Know, O Commander of the Faithful, that my second brother's name was Al-Hada, that is, the babbler, and he was the paralytic. Now it happened to him one day, as he was going about his business, that an old woman accosted him and said, "Stop a little, my good man, that I may tell thee of somewhat which, if it be to thy liking, thou shalt do for me, and I will pray Allah to give thee good of it." My brother stopped, and she went on, "I will put thee in the way of a certain thing, so thou not be prodigal of speech." "On with thy talk," quoth he, and she, "What sayest thou to handsome quarters, and a fair garden with flowing waters, flowers blooming and fruit growing, and old wine going, and a pretty young face whose owner thou mayest embrace from dark till dawn? If thou do whatso I bid thee, thou shalt see something greatly to thy advantage." "And is all this in the world?" asked my brother. And she answered, "Yes, and it shall be thine, so thou be reasonable and leave idle curiosity and many words, and do my bidding." "I will indeed, O my lady," said he. "How is it thou hast preferred me in this matter before all men, and what is it that so much pleaseth thee me?" Quoth she, "Did I not bid thee be spare of speech? Hold thy peace and follow me. Know that the young lady to whom I shall carry thee loveth to have her own way, and hateth being thwarted and all who gainsay. So if thou humour her, thou shalt come to thy desire of her." And my brother said, "I will not cross her in anything." Then she went on, and my brother followed her, and hungering after what she described to him, till they entered a fine large house, handsome and choicely furnished, full of eunuchs and servants, and showing signs of prosperity from top to bottom. And she was carrying him to the upper story, when the people of the house said to him, "What dost thou here?" But the old woman answered them, "Hold your peace and trouble him not. He is a workman, and we have occasion for him." Then she brought him into a fine great pavilion, with a garden in its midst. Never I saw a fairer, and made him sit upon a handsome couch. He had not sat long before he heard a loud noise, and in came a troop of slave girls, surrounding a lady like the moon on the night of its fullest. When he saw her, he rose up and made an obeisance to her, whereupon she welcomed him and bade him be seated. So he sat down, and she said to him, "Allah advance thee to honor. Is all well with thee?" "O my lady," he answered, "all with me is right well." Then she bade bring in food, and they set before her delicate viands. So she sat down to eat, making a show of affection to my brother, and jesting with him, though all the while she could not refrain from laughing. But as often as he looked at her, she signed towards her handmaidens, as though she were laughing at them. My brother, the ass, understood nothing, but in the excess of his ridiculous passion, he fancied that the lady was in love with him, and that she would soon grant him desire. When they had done eating, they set on the wine, and there came in 10 maidens like moons, with lutes ready stung in their hands, and fell to singing with full voices, sweet and sad, whereupon delight got hold upon him, and he took the cup from the lady's hands and drank it standing. Then she drank a cup of wine, and my brother, still standing, said to her, "Help," and bowed to her. She handed him another cup, and he drank it off, when she slapped him hard on the nape of his neck. Upon this, my brother would have gone out of the house in anger, but the old woman followed him and winked to him in return. So he came back, and the lady bade him sit, and he sat down without a word. Then she again slapped him on the nape of his neck. And the second slapping did not suffice her. She must needs make all her handmaidens also slap and cuff him. While he kept saying to the old woman, I never saw aught nicer than this. She on her side ceased not exclaiming, Enough, enough, I conjure thee, O my mistress. But the woman slapped him till he well nigh swooned away. Presently my brother rose and went out to obey a call of nature, but the old woman overtook him and said, Be patient a little, and thou shalt win to thy wish. How much longer have I to wait? My brother replied. This slapping hath made me feel faint. As soon as she is warm with wine, answered she, thou shalt have thy desire. So he returned to his place and sat down, whereupon all the handmaidens stood up, and the lady bade them perfume him and besprinkle his face with rose water. Then said she to him, Allah advance thee to honour. Thou hast entered my house and hast borne with my conditions, for whoso thwarteth me, I turn him away, and whoso is patient hath his desire. O mistress mine, said he, I am thy slave and in the hollow of thine hand. Know then, continued she, that Allah hath made me passionately fond of frolic, and whoso falleth in with my humour cometh by whatso he wisheth. Then she ordered her maidens to sing with loud voices till the whole company was delighted. After which she said to one of them, Take thy lord and do what is needful for him and bring him back to me forthright. So the damsel took my brother, and he not knowing what she would do with him. But the old woman overtook him and said, Be patient. There remaineth but little to do. At this his face brightened, and he stood up before the lady, while the old woman kept saying, Be patient. Thou wilt now at once win to thy wish. Till he said, Tell me what she would have the maiden do with me. Nothing but good, replied she, as I am thy sacrifice. She wisheth only to dye thy eyebrows and pluck out thy mustachios. Quoth he, As for the dyeing of my eyebrows, that will come off with washing. But for the plucking out of my mustachios, that indeed is a somewhat painful process. Be cautious how thou cross her, cried the old woman, for she hath set her heart on thee. So my brother patiently suffered her to dye his eyebrows and pluck out his mustachios, after which the maiden returned to her mistress and told her. Quoth she, Remaineth now only one other thing to be done. Thou must shave his beard and make him a smooth face. So the maiden went back and told him what her mistress had bidden her do. And my brother, the blockhead, said to her, How shall I do what will disgrace me before the folk? But the old woman said, She would do on this wise only that thou mayst be as beardless youth, and that no hair be left on thy face to scratch and prick her delicate cheeks. For indeed she is passionately in love with thee. So be patient, and thou shalt attain thine object. My brother was patient, and did her bidding and let shave off his beard. And when he was brought back to the lady, lo, he appeared, dyed red as to his eyebrows, plucked of both mustachios, shorn of his beard, rouged on both cheeks. At first she was affrighted at him. Then she made mockery of him, and laughing till she fell upon her back, said, O my lord, thou hast indeed won my heart by thy good nature. Then she conjured him by her life to stand up and dance, and he arose and capered about, and there was not a cushion in the house but she threw it at his head. And in like manner did all her women, who also kept pelting him with oranges and lemons and citrons till he fell down senseless from the cuffing on the nape of the neck, the pillowing and the fruit pelting. Now thou hast attained thy wish, said the old woman when he came round. There are no more blows in store for thee, and there remaineth but one little thing to do. It is her wont, when she is in her cups, to let no one have her until she put off her dress and trousers and remain stark naked. Then she will bid thee doff thy clothes and run, and she will run before thee as if she were flying from thee. And do thou follow her from place to place, till thy prickle stands at fullest point, when she will yield to thee, adding, strip off thy clothes at once. So he rose, well nigh lost in ecstasy, and doffing his raiment, showed himself mother naked. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. I hope you all enjoyed the reading. That was very interesting, wasn't it? Thank you all for tuning in. As usual, I'm going to respond to your wonderful comments afterwards, and nasty comments will be deleted. Sending you much love, and remember, going inwards instead of outwards. Bye.